Hare Krishna. We'll start with the prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today, in continuation of Canto 1, Chapter 13, we are reading text 32, 33, and 34. So I pray and accept and pray for the blessings for the seated Vaishnavas. So to say some words from Granth Raj, Srimad Bhagavatam today. And if there are any things I say wrong, I beg for forgiveness, and we'll be happy to have a discussion afterwards as well. So I will read text 32, 33, and 34, and then we'll go into the translation and purport. So I'll read all at once. Text 32. Tatra sanjayam asinam papracha udvignas manasa gavalgane kva nastato vrido hinascha netraya ambacha hata putartha pitravya kva kata suhrit api maya krita prakyane hata bandhu sa bhararaya asam samnaha shamalam gangyam dukhito apatat pitari uparte pandau sarvanna suhridha sisun arak satam vyasanata pitrabau kava gata vitaha. Well, read the word and translation. Tatra, there. Sanjayam, unto Sanjaya. Asinam, seated. Paprachta, he inquired from. Udvigna manasaha, filled with anxiety. Gavalgane, the son of Gavalgana. Sanjaya. Kava, where is? Na, our. Tata, uncle. Vridha, old. Inascha, and bereft of. Netraya, the eyes. Maharaj, translation. Maharaj Yudhistara, full of anxiety, turned to Sanjaya, who was sitting there, and said, "O Sanjaya, where is our uncle, who is old and blind?" Text 33. Amba, mother aunt. Cha, and. Hata putra, who had lost all her sons. Rita, in a sorry plight. Pitravaya, uncle Vidura. Kva, where? Gata, gone. Suhrit, well-wisher. Api, whether. Mai, unto me. Akrita, pregne, ungrateful. Hata bandhu, one who has lost all his sons. Sa, Dhritarashtra. Bhararaya, with his wife. Asam samna, in the doubtful mind. Shamalam, offenses. Gangayam, in the Ganga water. Dukhitha, in distressed mind. Apatat, fell down. Pitari, upon my father. I will read the translation first. Where is my well-wisher, Uncle Vidura, and Mother Gandhari, who is very afflicted due to all her sons' demise? My uncle Dhritarashtra was also very mortified due to the death of all his sons and grandsons. Undoubtedly, I am very grateful. Did he therefore take my offenses very seriously and along with his wife drown himself in the Ganga? Text 34. Pitari, upon my father. Uparate, falling down. Pandau, Maharaj Pandu. Sarvan, all. Na, of us. Suhridaya, well-wishers. Sisun, small children. Arak satam, protected. Vyasa Natha, from all kinds of dangers. Pitrabau, uncles. Kva, where. Gatau, have departed. Ita, from this bad place. Translation. When my father Pandu fell down and we were all small children, These two uncles gave us protection from all kinds of calamities. They were always our good well-wishers. Alas, where have they gone from here? So I'll read the purport from text 33. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Pandavas, especially Maharaj Yudhistara and Arjun, anticipated the after effects of the battle of Kurukshetra, and therefore Arjuna declined to execute the fighting. The fight was executed by the will of the Lord, but the effects of family agreement, as they had thought of it before, had come to be true. Maharaj Yudhistara was always conscious of the great plight of his uncle Dhritarashtra and aunt Gandhari, and therefore he took all possible care of them in their old age and aggrieved conditions. When therefore he could not find his uncle and aunt in the palace, naturally his doubts arose, and he conjectured that they had gone down to the water of the Ganga. He thought himself ungrateful because when the Pandavas were fatherless, Maharaj Dhritarashtra had given them all royal facilities to live. And in return, he had killed all Dhritarashtra's sons in the battle of Kurukshetra. As a pious man, Maharaj Yudhistara took into account all his unavoidable misdeeds. I'll repeat, as a pious man, Maharaj Yudhistara took into account all his unavoidable misdeeds, and he never thought of the misdeeds of his uncle and the company. Dhritarashtra had suffered the effects of his own misdeeds by the will of the Lord, but Maharaj Yudhistara was thinking only of his own unavoidable misdeeds. That is the nature of a good man and devotee of the Lord. A devotee never finds fault with others, but tries to find his own and thus rectify them as far as possible. This is a beautiful verse, as all the other verses are in Granth-raj Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll just say some prayer. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jana Shalakya Chakshur Almitam Yana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Hare Krishna. So as I was contemplating what to say, and I took some time to take some notes, and there is so much beautiful and deep meanings in this. And the title of this class is Elevated Consciousness of Maharaj Yudhistara. So we can see, and how do we know it's an elevated consciousness from this verse in particular? We can see that in a number of factors. One of them is the way Maharaj Yudhistara is asking questions. So we can understand the consciousness of somebody in the way they ask questions, not only the way they ask questions and the quality of the question that comes about. And in these questions by Maharaj Yudhistara, there is a lot of care and concern in those questions for his uncle and his aunt. And in every question and in every word in Srimad Bhagavatam, every word matters. Every word has a lot of deep meaning. And so these verses are no exception. So not only there are very high quality questions, there is a care and concern, but also as a bhakti yogi, Maharaj Yudhistara, that he was, there is a lot of sensitivity in these questions, which is an example of that is that sensitivity is my uncle is mortified, and he knows that. He knows that my uncle is old and he's blind, and my aunt is suffering from the demise of her sons. And the other part of the sensitivity is he's looking at himself as ungrateful. So the whole, the way the question is, there is a lot of care, concern, sensitivity, and a very high quality of inquiry about the well-being of his aunt and uncle. And the other part is, how do we know somebody is elevated? That Srila Prabhupada says that the nature of a good man and devotee of the Lord is that the devotee never finds faults with others, but tries to find his own and rectify them as far as possible and as soon as possible. So I was comparing and contrasting this fault and the consciousness of Maharaj Yudhistira. So, first of all, Srila Prabhupada says that Yudhistira had unavoidable misdeeds. They were unavoidable because they were the battle was fought with the will of the Lord. So there is no way Maharaj Yudhistira could have avoided that war. So that was the will of the Lord. But still, because Kaurva's sons were killed, Maharaj Yudhishthira took those misdeeds which were unavoidable unto him in this question. Whereas if we look at Dhritarashtra's misdeeds, they were very avoidable because he had million or more opportunities to avoid that war and create the harmony between Kauravas and Pandavas, which due to his family, due to his attachment with the temporary family, he was not able to do that. So his misdeeds, Dhritarashtra's misdeeds were avoidable, whereas Yudhishthira Maharaj misdeeds, so-called misdeeds, were unavoidable. And then, yes, Maharaj Yudhishthira says that in text 34, that Dhritarashtra gave him, when they were little children, they gave him shelter. And then, yes, that shelter was provided. And so was Maharaj Yudhishthira, who provided shelter after the war. But the difference between these two shelters is that Maharaj Yudhishthira accepted and forgave all the prior mistakes, and he accepted with full loving heart Dhritarashtra into the palace. Whereas in the case of Dhritarashtra, when he provided the shelter to the Pandavas, at that time Pandavas were innocent children, and there was no offense committed by the Pandavas. So it was as a matter of kingly duty to provide shelter to your nephews if your brother has passed away, and especially those nephews were completely innocent and small. And then the other compare and contrast is that Maharaj Yudhishthira is bringing onto himself that he's ungrateful, and there must have been, because Dhritarashtra left the palace, he couldn't see. Dhritarashtra was always there, and Maharaj Yudhishthira came and he didn't see him. And right away, the conclusion was that it must have been my offenses. So my offenses were taken seriously. So even though Maharaj Yudhishthira didn't commit any senses, or there are no references in the scriptures that we are aware of that Maharaj Yudhishthira did offenses when Dhritarashtra was living with them. But still, first, Yudhishthira Maharaj took unto himself that he must be ungrateful and he must have committed offenses, and Dhritarashtra must have taken those offenses seriously. What we learn from the scriptures is that Maharaj Yudhishthira was incapable of doing those offenses. And still he thought that he committed those offenses. So what we learn from this is that Yudhishthira was putting Dhritarashtra above him at all times, and he did not ask like a normal person, what happened and where is Maharaj Dhritarashtra. He didn't ask that question. He actually, his consciousness was such that because he couldn't, Dhritarashtra was old, he was blind, he was distressed because of loss of his sons. So he was feeling full compassion for Dhritarashtra, as if whatever Dhritarashtra is going through is what Maharaj Yudhishthira is going through. Is it looks like that in this verse. And so the other compare and contrast is that Maharaj Yudhishthira was only remembering the good deeds of Dhritarashtra, like he provided shelter when they were little, and he forgot, or he didn't have any sense of all the misdeeds created by Dhritarashtra and the company. So of course this shows that Yudhishthira not only forgave with complete heart, but also felt deep compassion and love for his uncle and aunt. And the other compare and contrast is that, yes, Maharaj Yudhishthira says that Dhritarashtra has lost all his sons, but guess what? So had Maharaj Yudhishthira had also, Pandavas also lost all their sons, but so there is a similarity there, but Maharaj Yudhistira was only feeling the pain of Dhritarashtra in this particular verse. So it was like taking somebody's miseries and dukh as one of his own. That is a sign of pure devotee. And in these questions, they are filled with so much compassion and so much love for his uncle. And Maharaj Yudhistira is not talking like a modern day politician who is trying to appear nice to get votes. Maharaj Yudhistira needed no votes. He was asking these questions of compassion with sincerity, sensitivity, care, and concern. And so it is very unlike a modern day politician. So the other part is that Maharaj Yudhistira had not thinking, wasn't on his consciousness or on his mind that I am better than Dhritarashtra, or I am giving protection and I am the doer, or anything like that. So when somebody has reached that consciousness, elevated consciousness, and we have seen in the prior verses how Yudhishthira Maharaj was a very God-conscious person, paying respect to elderly, doing his spirituality, following with consistency, and that's how he achieved that elevated consciousness. So as I was thinking about this, how come Maharaj Yudhishthira was only finding faults with himself? And that was his consciousness. It was not that he was trying to appear nice. It was just real, genuine him. And so another incident that comes to mind in our recent history of Vaishnavism is the story of Raghunath Dasa Goswami when he went to Jagannath Puri, and of course he was son of a very rich parents, and but he initially started to live as a beggar and begging prasadam, only eating very little to keep his soul and body together, not more, just a few morsels in a day. And then Raghunath Dasa Goswami was actually, he would just stand in the front of the temple just for a little while. And if somebody was able to give him prasadam, he would take it. And if somebody, of course, he was always last in line. And if somebody would not give him, then he would just accept that as also mercy of the Lord. But then Raghunath Das Goswami thought that, well, even I don't deserve this. I should not be sitting, standing in front and begging like this. I don't even deserve this. So then he started to go and look for just to keep his body and soul together, the prasadam that was left unsold and had gotten rotten by material energy for 3 days, and even the cows would not eat it. So he would then take those morsels of rice and then wash them and then honor them with great pleasure and love. So that was another example of the elevated consciousness. But then what happens when Raghunath Das Goswami was in such a consciousness is that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, and then he essentially asked that whatever he was honoring to have him honor as well, which Raghunath Das Goswami first tried to hide or even say, you shouldn't be having this. But then Lord Chaitanya honored it with a lot of grace and love, and said, this is the kind of prasadam I haven't taken before. So please just don't take it for yourself. Please share it as well. So what I took as I was meditating on this, what I took it from this is that as the consciousness elevates, the grace of the Lord flows. The grace of the Lord is everywhere, just like the sunlight is there in the daytime. But once that consciousness is elevated, then the grace of the Lord flows like a ocean, and that just soaks in the soul of that elevated conscious person That's how the grace of the Lord is flowing. And that was the state of mind and state of consciousness of Maharaj Yudhistara, that he was finding faults, he was finding undeserved, he thought he was ungrateful while he was not. And he genuinely felt that he must have committed offenses. So he felt himself to be very undeserving to even serve Dhritarashtra. And he thought that maybe some offenses have been committed, and that's why Dhritarashtra has left. But with that consciousness is when the grace of the Lord flows. And so while the grace of the Lord is unlimited, there is an opposite effect as well, which could be classified as grace blockers. That meaning that when we find fault with others, when we don't feel compassionate and we don't feel the others' miseries as one of our own, when we judge others, when we remember the past wrongdoings of others, and also when we objectively fail to see our own shortcomings, that's what when the grace of the Lord tends to get blocked out from our lives. So this is I was thinking about it. How do we apply this? What is the lesson in these questions? And what was the elevated consciousness of Maharaj Yudhistara, and how that elevated consciousness invites grace, but also as we think about that elevated consciousness and how sometimes when we find fault with others, when we fail to see our own shortcomings, how we actually block the grace of the Lord, and how we can learn and be constantly aware, constantly sensitive to our own shortcomings, and only seeing the good and the divine side of others, and ignoring the demonic sides of others. And by that, I'm not saying that devotees become doormats or anything like that. It's more at the concept of forgiving and letting go from our own consciousness, the wrongdoing of others, and then focus on their divine side. And that doesn't mean we don't objectively deal in our day-to-day life with the wrongdoings, but we don't let them carry those wrongdoings in our heart and consciousness. So that is what my learning was from this very deep and sensitive questioning of Yudhistira Maharaj, is that how bhakti yoga, with the path of bhakti, Maharaj Yudhistira was able to be highly sensitive to what is happening around him, and how he was objectively seeing the situation of Dhritarashtra and Mother Gandhari leaving the palace. So, and then how does our consciousness gets elevated? It is just constantly watering the seeds of bhakti. Our literatures and scriptures tell us that only by watering the seed of the bhakti we can elevate our consciousness, where the grace of the Lord can flow without any interruption. And of course, we learn that there is no other way but then to water the seed of the bhakti. So those were my reflections and realizations from these three shlokas with very deep and concerning and caring questions from Maharaj Yudhistira. So I will pause, and please feel free to correct me if I've said something wrong. And I'll be very glad to hear any reflections or questions from the devotees.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Quick thing, this weekend you have 1 hour in case if you want to speak, Prabhu. I just want to let you know.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, these were the main reflections at this point.
Sure, Prabhu. I just want to let you know.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. I like the way you compared and contrasted the consciousness of Yudhishthira Maharaj and Dhritarashtra. I mean, it was like, yeah, you put it very nicely. So I was just appreciating that. Thank you so much. He also lost his sons. I mean, of course, we know, but yeah, when you're putting this together, it looks like the way he's thinking about Dhritarashtra. I mean, of course, if somebody else is in this situation, maybe you would have thought, okay, I also had the similar kind of problems. Right? So actually, yeah. So you said that Dhritarashtra has all the other alternatives. He doesn't need to do what he did it when he was even when they were small children, but here the other way. So it was unavoidable. I mean, right, the war. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji, for saying those words. It's all Guru Maharaj's mercy that I was able to say a few words.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. This is Jayan. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada Maharaj ki Jai. Just have, just thinking about that situation, right, where you kind of give the benefit of doubt to the other person, right? You know, just naturally, at least for me, I don't know about others. It comes up that naturally we just think the other person is at fault, right? Initially, and with the practice of bhakti yoga, I hope it'll help me purify myself more. The fact that just take one chance and give a benefit of doubt to the other person, and give it some time, and maybe it'll sometimes gives a different perspective, or at least calms you or slows you down from the anger, because dealing with people at work, you don't know what their intentions are. Of course, within the family it's a different story, but when you're interacting outside work, outside your family circle or a friend circle, yeah, not sure if it will help in every situation, but at least calm oneself and gives a benefit of doubt to see if the other person might be right, or think from his perspective. I have to accept, doesn't happen to me every time, but could help in some situations. And that's what I felt Maharaj Yudhishthira, was initial reaction was. And of course, he's a very high elevated soul. And, I have to practice more, a lot more.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Jain Prabhu, Danvat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for those reflections. And so, yes, my realization is that by constantly following the path of bhakti and service, can we elevate our consciousness, where we can self-reflect more and more. Because not only bhakti reduces the fluctuation of the mind, but also elevates the consciousness to a different level. So yes, it may be a matter of giving somebody a benefit of doubt that they may be right and we may not be. But also sometimes it's possible that they may not be right either, and they may have done something wrong. So it's how we let go of what was wrong done. Of course, we cannot be doormats and have others abuse us, but at the same time, we can forgive others and let go of that wrongdoing. So it doesn't rule our world, that doesn't rule our mind. So if we ignore majority of the shortcomings of others and focus on their divine side, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, every entity has been provided a divine side and demonic side, and focus on the divine side of others, then we can relate and build lasting relationships with others. So yes, sometimes the others may be right, but sometimes others may not be right. But then how we direct and repurpose our consciousness to their divine side as opposed to the demonic side, because everyone, that's a fact of life. Krishna says there is a divine and demonic side. So and I'm part of that. I've got divine and demonic side. So how do we actually repurpose our consciousness constantly to the divine side of others, and then we can find more love, compassion, and lasting relationships.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Hare Hare. Okay, so it looks like there are no more questions or reflections. So again, I beg for forgiveness if I said anything wrong. I can right now close the class. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.